It's Traina and Tana on a special live 2 hour Locked On Giants podcast. We're talking all things Giants as part of Giants rebuild season. That's coming up next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Giant fans? Patricia Traina here on the Locked On Giants podcast. We're coming to you live. And if you're wondering why I'm so pumped up, it's because I am joined by DaEntertainah. Chris, my friend, good to see you.
It's a pleasure to be back on the channel. This time we got it right this time. We were talking about right before we went live last time. The first 15 minutes nobody saw. It says live. I see it in the top left corner. Excited to be back on. We got a lot to talk about. It's kind of been a little bit of a dead spell there for about 2-3 weeks, but now things are starting to heat up after the combine. We got free agency coming up in about a week or two. So not that we're going to be super active, but it'll be interesting to see which players the New York Giants decide to bring back. And, I'm sure we'll talk about some potential one-year signings that maybe the New York Giants could look to bring in. But regardless, super excited to be back on. Big draft coming up for the Giants. And thank you so much for having me back on the channel.
Always a pleasure to have you on, Chris. And we've got, like you said, we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to go about 2 hours, folks. We're going to talk about roster rebuild. We're going to take your questions. So you know what to do if you're watching us on YouTube. Just drop your questions into the comment section there, and we'll pop some of them in and scatter them throughout the show. And let's get to it, Chris. I mean, let's. I guess we should start with the combine. The combine was last week. General thoughts on the combine? Anything in particular stand out to you, surprise you, disappoint you?
Yeah, I mean, I never want to read too much into the combine. I use it kind of as I guess a tool, not the whole tool bag when evaluating players. But I know some teams certainly look at that, and it's part of the evaluation process with some of these prospects. So, I mean, in terms of some of the guys that stood out, Trayvon Walker. I mean, that guy shot up for me. I was watching it, and just his athletic ability, he looked like he was a tight end. The guy's 273 pounds. He's a defensive end, runs a 4.51, and just his ability to drop back in coverage is what really impressed me in some of those drills. People don't really know what his exact position is going to be. Some people feel like he needs to add 10 pounds to play in the line, or if he wants to be a stand-up linebacker, maybe needs to lose 5 or 10 pounds. But that was, I think, one of the guys that definitely stood out the most for me. There was a couple of other players as well, but that one really stood out for me.
Yeah, and also Sauce Gardner was a guy who shot up the boards. You see all these guys that are shooting up the boards, and disclaimer, there were guys that chose not to go through all the drills, if any drills at all. So you can't really say that hurt their stock, but a lot of speed in that in the combine, and not just at receivers. I mean, there was speed across the board, which amazed me. I had Tony Pauline on and Jordan Reed this past week on my podcast, and I said, "Hey, what was with all that speed?" And Jordan Reed said, "Well, they installed a new turf in Indy, so maybe that had something to do with it. But still, a lot of speed. But just all the drills and stuff." I think what that probably made some teams do is go back, check the tape, and say, wait, what did I miss here? Because especially a lot of these guys so athletic, excelling in these drills, and some, it's got to marry up with what's on tape in the actual football games.
The other guy, now that you're talking about the speed aspect of it, the other guy that really stood out to me was Jordan Davis. He's what, 340 pounds. He ran a 4.84 or something like that. I think he definitely helped his draft stock as well. The other thing I noticed during the combine, I don't know who was in charge of the clocks, but the times were always way off. When you would first see the times, it would be 4.92, and then the official time would be 4.84. I noticed that more so this year than others, so they got to get that situated. But a lot of speed. Aquanu's another one. Aquanu ran at a 4.93. You're talking about a guy, a big offensive lineman. That was impressive. I think there were 8, if I'm not mistaken, offensive linemen in this year's combine that ran under a 5, which was a record.
I know, that's pretty impressive. I mean, although for an offensive lineman, really what you got to pay attention to more so is the 10-yard split.
And the 3-cone drill. Yeah,
3-cone drill, exactly. I mean, the 40-yard dash, that's it's nice, but how often are you going to see a offensive lineman rumble downfield 40 yards, unless it's on an interception or something like that? But Yeah. So, I mean, anyway, Chris, with the combine, and now pro days are going to be starting up shortly, but do you think that maybe the Giants, I don't want to say changed their mind, but do you think there was enough to maybe have them have second thoughts regarding, okay, instead of doing this, we should go here, or maybe shake up their board a little bit at the top there?
Yeah, I mean, right. It's hard for me to say, obviously what they're going to do right now. But if you ask me today, based off everything Shane has said, I don't think they're going to force a pick. I think if they're in love with a tackle prospect, they're going to take it. I think we could both agree. We've talked about this on the show before. That's our biggest need right now is filling the rest of that offensive line. Outside of Andrew Thomas, it's been an absolute disgrace. So I'm leaning that they'll go tackle with one of those two picks, but I don't think it's a formality. I wouldn't be shocked. Like if say Equanu's off the board and Neal's off the board, which I'm hoping is not the case. I want one of those two individuals to fall to us at 5. If they do, I think we'll snatch them. But if they're both off the board, would I be shocked if we double up on the defense? Not necessarily. We could certainly still take Charles Cross, but I think the New York Giants are going to try to match BPA with need. Shane has talked about in the past that he's a positional value guy. So unlike Gettleman, I don't expect us to be taking a running back that early. I don't expect us to be taking an interior defensive lineman within the first 7 picks. I think they're going to be looking on the line, potentially an edge rusher. Sauce Gardner has been a very popular choice amongst Giants fans who fits this defensive scheme beautifully. You talk about a scheme where we want to run press man coverage, right? He's got longer arms than some of those. What am I thinking about? The wobbly guys when you go to the gas station where you see the wobbly.
Yeah, the wacky wavy arm guys. Exactly.
Yeah. That's what I felt like when I was watching Sauce Gardner. I mean, he's 6'3", definitely has all the measurables, and had an impressive combine as well. So that's a guy I got my eye on.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Now, let's talk about offensive tackle for a minute, because I think, Ike Ekwonu, he's a run that card up to the podium type of guy. Evan Neal, I think is also in that category, but Charles Cross to me is kind of the wild card here. Now, with Charles Cross, if I remember correctly, didn't really operate a lot out of a 3-point stance. Great and athletic pass blocker, no question about it. The tape screams that. Run blocking, not quite up there. That being said, I mean, if Ekwonu and Neal are gone and Cross is sitting there, is 5 or 7 too high, you think, to take Cross? Or would you just say, you know what, this kid's a monster. He doesn't get beat by speed on the edge there. We'll fix the run blocking part of it, but that's going to be my pick.
I wouldn't be upset if they took him there at 5. The way I look at it is, like, I think a lot of Giants fans would want and it all depends on who's available. Is Kayvon Thibodeau there? If Kayvon Thibodeau's there, I definitely have interest there. But I think a lot of Giants fans look at it like, it's a little too early to take Cross. The way I look at it is this. If, say, you want to take Sauce Gardner at 5, the way I look at it is this. If I look at the Carolina Panthers, I think the Panthers are going to either go quarterback or they're going to take Charles Cross. There's been a lot of rumors that they're interested in taking Charles Cross. They have a lot of needs on their offensive line as well. So knowing that, if I like Cross, I'm going to take him at 5. I'm not going to, and I don't think the Panthers are going to take a cornerback. They took J.C. Horn in the first round last year. So if they like him, a lot of people have him mocked to 6, 8, 9, a top 10 pick. So if you like him, it's a big need of ours. Is it going to make people ecstatic? Not necessarily, but I don't think it's a bad pick.
Now, speaking of the Panthers, this is kind of interesting because there's been talk about the Giants potentially trading one of those 2 first-round picks. Now, if they trade out at 5, that can significantly help their cap situation, which, by the way, I'm not advocating. The cap situation can be fixed by tweaking contracts if you need to. But that being said, a lot of people do think that the Panthers might go quarterback. I'm not so sure that they will, because this is not really a strong quarterback class. I mean, there are good prospects, but nobody really screaming quarterback, stud, like a Justin Herbert or a Pat Mahomes or, one of those guys. I know there are outliers, Mac Jones, I think guys that can be taken later in the draft and whatnot. But I'm just wondering, I mean, we can't assume that the Panthers are going to take a quarterback. So I'm guessing that might make it hard to trade down from number 5.
Yeah.
What about, though, trading down from number 7? Because now you've got Seattle is probably going to be in the market for a quarterback, and we still got time to go. This can obviously change, but you still have teams that are going to be potentially in the market for a quarterback. Maybe want to get the guy in now, let him sit behind, the veteran that they have on roster, and then make the transition to next year. So, do you think trading down at 7 is more realistic than trading down at 5?
I think they're both semi-realistic. I could see us trading out of both spots. I think it all depends on who's available at 5th overall. And if the New York Giants aren't in love with the prospect, maybe it does add added value to a team to potentially jump Carolina in the fear that they could potentially take a quarterback. In terms of teams that could trade up, I think the ability for the New York Giants to trade down took a big hit over the last couple of days because obviously Denver now is no longer in the market for a quarterback. Washington, you figure, is not going to trade up to get a quarterback after they got Carson Wentz. They still could draft one, but we're not going to trade with Washington anyway. So I think that the market's a little bit less, but like you said, there's still teams. Atlanta could certainly, like you think about Atlanta, Matt Ryan's on the tail end of his career. Like you just said, that may be a perfect scenario for Malik Willis to come into, to sit under Ryan for a year, learn from under him. That's a potential team. I think Minnesota's a potential team. I think there's a couple of teams that could still trade up for a quarterback. And I think the Giants have to seriously entertain that possibility because you have to also be thinking about the 2023 draft and beyond, knowing that it's more than likely probable that you're not going to take a quarterback this year. If you feel it's at least a high probability, you may want to move up and get a quarterback in the following draft. You want to get as much draft capital as you can. And when you look around the league, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be looking for a quarterback in 2023. Detroit probably, potentially Seattle if they don't take a quarterback in this draft. A number of others that I think are setting themselves up for that 2023 draft. And if the Giants trade down, they'll increase the probability of being able to move up.
Yeah, and that's a good point because, if Daniel Jones doesn't pan out for the Giants this year, they're going to be in the market for a quarterback next year as well. So you want to add the draft stock, I would think, for next year, just in case you do have to move up, because I think the Giants, I'm not saying they're going to be playoff bound this year. I think they've still got a ways to go. I do think they're going to be better than 4 wins. Fingers crossed, I hope. So hopefully they better be. So I mean, I could see them still picking in the top half of next year's draft right now, if, all things based on what we know. But I think you're going to want to have that extra draft capital just in case Daniel Jones doesn't work out. And that's kind of interesting because, there's been talk about the Giants having interest in Mitchell Trubisky. Mm-hmm. I don't see them being able to afford him. I mean, if Trubisky has an opportunity to, say, go to the Steelers where he can be a starter, wouldn't that make more sense, especially if they're going to pay him low-level starter money that I just don't think the Giants are going to be able to afford?
Yeah, the only way I could see Trubisky coming to the Giants is if, quite frankly, the market's not there. And if he feels he has a legitimate chance to win the starting job over Daniel Jones. And maybe he would. I don't know. The Giants have come out and said that Daniel Jones is going to be the quarterback. But I think there's so many other teams out there. The Colts now are one of them, right? That need a quarterback potentially for next year, or at least a guy that could compete with a rookie. And I think that's probably a better opportunity for him. Maybe he's drawn to the fact that he's accustomed to the scheme that Brian Daboll ran. Obviously with the Buffalo Bills, and maybe some Giants fans look at it that way. I just don't, like you said, unless he's willing to take a big discount, if he feels this is the ideal spot for him, maybe on a 1-year deal to be able to sign a bigger contract the following year if he gets an opportunity to start this year. But outside of that, I don't think we're going to get him. But the good news is I think there's a lot of very qualified backup quarterbacks on the market that the Giants could get for $2 or $3 million. Andy Dalton's available, potentially a guy like Marcus Mariota. I don't know what his market will be, but Tyrod Taylor. There's a lot of semi-proven backup quarterbacks available.
Yeah, for sure. Folks, just a reminder, start sending in your questions. We're going to start answering a few of your questions, sprinkle them in as we go along. We're going to be with you for about 2 hours today. If you could stand it. I mean, I'm excited. I love it. Chris, I want to add, sticking with the quarterback situation for a second, one of the other things that kind of popped up regarding the Trubisky rumors is you've had the Giants organization, just about every main figure, if you will, in the front office, John Mara, Daboll, Shane, speak highly of Daniel Jones, kind of endorse him, if you will. To me, the thought of bringing in a Trubisky who I could see potentially challenging Jones. Now, see, here's where I have the problem. I think Daniel Jones needs to be nudged. I don't think they should just say, okay, Daniel, here it is. Here's the starting job on a silver platter. Give him a little bit of competition. But it's like, at the same time, John Mara sat there and he said, well, we've done everything possible to screw this kid up. We haven't given him the best, scenario or setting to succeed. So, I mean, how do you balance that if you're the Giants? I mean, you bring in a Trubisky. I could see a Trubisky potentially beating out a Jones, to be honest with you. But at the same time, you want to have enough of a real competition to get the best out of the kid. I mean, how do you balance it?
Yeah, I mean, if we're being honest with ourselves and not just thinking about it from a Giants fan's perspective, we talk about the upside for Daniel Jones. You don't think Chicago Bears fans felt the same way about Mitch Trubisky year 2, year 3 into his career? You're talking about a guy that they traded up for to take second overall. You're talking about a guy that went 11-5 his second season in the NFL, had a pretty good statistical year if you go back and look at it. I know he's not a great quarterback, but he's certainly a guy that I think could go toe-to-toe with Daniel Jones, at least at this point in their careers, especially being that he'd have the advantage of already playing in this scheme that Dable's going to bring over from the Buffalo Bills. He's got familiarity there. And to be honest with you, at this point, I'm not too concerned with that as a Giants fan. I hope Daniel Jones goes out there and proves, all the doubters wrong and he's incredible. But if the Giants feel like they want an open quarterback competition, go ahead and do that. We have to remember as Giants fans that neither one of these guys have an attachment to Daniel Jones. They could say one thing to the media. They may think completely differently behind closed doors. But the thing I'll say is I don't even think it's worthy of talking about because it is worthy of talking about, but I don't think it's like a realistic possibility because like you said earlier, we don't have the money to bring in a guy like Mitch Trubisky. I think there's so many quarterback deprived teams out there that are going to be willing to give him $10 to $15 million, maybe even more potentially. Who knows with what some of these quarterbacks make to come in there and at least be a 2 or 3 year stopgap. So I just don't think the Giants are going to be able to land him.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I would be very, very surprised if they land Trubisky. I know Trubisky was on with Adam Schefter on his podcast and said, he was he spoke highly of Dable. And, I think right now everybody's kind of in that honeymoon stage. Everybody's saying nice things about one another. But, what wasn't it? Who was that coach that used to say talk is cheap? I can't seem to remember the guy's name, but I love the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom Coughlin. I know, folks.
Talk is cheap. Play the game.
Yes.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know the phrase.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's take a few of your questions now. You can, again, pop them in if you're watching us live on YouTube. Just pop them in on the comment section. And we are going to kick one off by, let's see, LA Sports wants to know predictions for remaining trades and cuts. Okay, which we haven't gotten to that, but let's talk about that. I mean, just real quick, for those who haven't been keeping track, the Giants cut Kyle Rudolph, no surprise there. Devonta Booker, which for me was a mild surprise. I knew it could happen, but still I was hoping that it wouldn't. Riley Dixon, not a surprise there. They restructured Sterling Shepard. We're waiting on the numbers. I have preliminary numbers on Sterling Shepard. So let's talk about predictions for remaining trades and cuts. I think Bradberry is not going to, certainly not at his current cap number, which is over 21 million. I think he's somebody you got to keep an eye on. And then I'm curious about Blake Martinez, what happens there, because he was approached for a restructure, if I'm not mistaken, not a restructure. I mean a pay cut. I'm sorry. Let me clarify that. And no word yet there. So, I mean, Chris, what do you think? Is there anybody else that kind of stands out at you that is definitely going to be a trade or cut candidate?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, I think the most obvious guys have already been cut. I thought Booker would be cut, not because of his lack of production last year, but because he's replaceable. You could get a running back in the 4th or 5th round and pay him a fraction of what you were, due to pay him. You were due to pay him $3 million. So I thought they would cut Booker. Obviously, the Rudolph cut to me was obvious, along with Dixon. I'm so glad we got rid of him. It saves you $3 million. Go out and draft a punter, or you could save a lot of. Same thing with the running back with the punter. You could save a lot of money by drafting one later in the draft. So I thought those were obvious cuts. In terms of the guys that are still on the roster, like you said, I think it's going to come down to, are some of these guys willing to take a discount like Blake Martinez? Obviously, Sterling Shepard already did so. Martinez coming off the injury. I think he has to realize his market is nowhere near $14 million. And I think it would cost $5.5 million if the Giants were to cut him. You'd save about $8.5 million. So if he's willing to come down the way in which Shepard probably did, you bring him back. If not, you cut ties and you draft another linebacker in this year's draft. Bradberry to me is the most obvious name because Joe Schoen talked about freeing up $40 million. The only way I could see us freeing up $40 million without backloading contracts, which Schoen has clearly stated he is not in the business of doing, is being able to trade James Bradberry. Now, I don't think we'll cut Bradberry because I think there's a lot of teams out there that are desperate for cornerback help, and Bradberry is still an above-average cornerback in the NFL. Maybe you could use that to trade back up into the first round as a piece, obviously with other draft capital. Maybe you just get a third-round pick for him, whatever. But I do think there'll be a market for Bradberry. I think the Giants will trade him, and you'll save about $12 or $13 million or whatever it is, and it'll go towards this year's cap. So I think he's an obvious one. In terms of some smaller guys, I mean, Julian Love's a possibility. I know everybody loves him, but he's due to make almost $3 million. So maybe the Giants could go that route. Nick Gates with all the leg injuries is a possibility. Caden Smith, even though we've cut all of our tight ends already, that would save you $2.5 million. Darius Slayton, I think, is a trade possibility that could save you another $2.5 million. There's some smaller contracts out there that they'll pick and choose between. O'Shane Zimenez saves you $1 million if you cut him. So they'll find a way to save that $40 million. But Bradberry is obviously the biggest thing.
Yeah, Bradberry, you get rid of that contract and you're talking a whole new ballgame there. And, speaking of Bradberry, we got another question here from Alfred O, who asks, any truth about Bradberry trade to the Ravens? I know there's been a bunch of, draft wins and trade rumor wins picking up. You know what I'm thinking, Chris, I wonder if the Giants are going to wait to move Bradberry. I mean, they to be honest with you, they can't wait too long, and they've waited long enough, in my opinion, because if I'm not mistaken, they have to be under the cap by Monday. Actually, Wednesday, the 16th is the deadline. But if they're going to be able to do anything in terms of legal tampering, they have to get their house in order. But there's other ways, like you said, that they can clear out some money if they need to, and if you want to move up, like you said. Would you, make a trade with, say, the Ravens, or would you just kind of hold out and go with the, I don't know, the Chiefs? I think can use a cornerback. I mean, a lot of teams can use a cornerback. The Bengals,
exactly. There's another team.
Yeah,
they could go either way for me, and I wouldn't be surprised if they go that route because you wait till after free agency. Maybe those teams aren't able to get the corners that they thought they may be able to get in free agency. They look at Bradberry as a guy that could be an immediate contributor. And maybe you could use Bradberry as a part of a package that can move up to the back end of the first round. Maybe go out, get yourself a guard for the offensive line or an edge rusher or whatever. So I think there's multiple ways they could go about doing this. But in the end, regardless, Bradberry, I don't think will be a New York Giant in 2022.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. And by the way, we were talking about Sterling Shepard before, so I just got the numbers. They just came in. So his new deal has a max value of $5.25 million. He was scheduled to make $8.5 million. So he can make some of that money back, but we're looking at roughly a little more than $3 million difference. That per ESPN, folks. So there's the numbers there for Sterling Shepard. Now, I'm curious to see what incentives are in there, if they're not likely to be earned or likely to be earned. And for those of you who don't know what that means, likely to be earned incentives will count against this year's cap. So they could be things like play time, number of receptions, number of touchdowns, stuff that a player could likely earn. Not likely to be earned generally gets kicked into the following year's cap. All right. So that can include things like Pro Bowl berths, winning being part of a playoff win, stuff that you don't know.
We're hoping that the incentives are Super Bowl MVP because
yeah, exactly. So
we know it's coming nowhere near that. So as of now, outside of the potential bonuses, what did you say against the cap it is exactly?
His new deal has a max value of $5.25 million.
Okay.
So I don't know I've got to look at that's a chunk, obviously a chunk amount. I've got to see how it's broken down, but I know a lot of people were wondering about that. So that came in just now via ESPN for those wondering. So I got a little alert on my watch here. Said I'm like, oh, what just buzzed me? So I stay on top of the news because I'm expecting some news to come down today with the Giants as they continue to cut down on the cap. But anyway, just real quick. Joe Shane train. Don't forget Martinez took the pay cut. I don't think Martinez accepted it yet, unless I missed something. Did I miss something, Chris?
I
I know
didn't.
they.
I maybe I missed it too. I've heard that it's potential that he will take a pay cut, but I've not
Yes,
heard.
it's on the table. I don't think he's accepted it.
Yeah,
So, I mean, as of when we record this now, whether or not that happens later today, that's another story. So, all right, let me see.
I just want to see this because I see it. I see Chris 60 said 5.2 million. Don't like that at all at first glance. One, like you said, we don't know the specifics if all the 5.2 is going to go against the cap because some of it may,
Right.
bonus driven. But the other thing I'll say is, no matter what, 4.5 was going against the cap because if we cut him, 4.5 was going against the cap. So even if it's 5.2 against the cap, it's an extra 700,000 than it would have been if you just cut the guy. So doesn't bother me either way.
Yeah, I'll get the information and I'll do something on Giants Country, excuse me, and break that down for you guys if you want to check that out. That should be out later today, I'm hoping. So, all right, let's get a couple more questions in here. This is from David Belicia. What backup quarterbacks would be available that aren't better than Jones and would cause an immediate quarterback controversy? Well, I mean, I think let me tackle the quarterback controversy part. That would all depend on if Jones missed time and then the backup came in and just lit the scoreboard up. I mean, that's how you have these quote unquote controversies. Think last year, like when Mike White came in for the Jets and everybody was, oh my God, Mike White, who's Zach Wilson, so that's how you get those controversies. But as far as backup quarterbacks that aren't better than Jones, I mean, do we really want somebody who's not better than Jones? I would think after the Glennon experiment, we would want somebody on par with Jones at the very least. I mean, wouldn't you agree, Chris?
Yeah, we definitely want a guy that could come in there and not embarrass you.
Right.
And some of the names I said earlier, I think are fine candidates. Tyrod Taylor, I think, is a fine candidate. I think he's a guy that could come in and not necessarily win you a football game, but he's not going to lose it. Same thing for a guy like Andy Dalton. I there's a number of others. There's actually a lot of free agent quarterbacks, but which is good, which means the market will probably be less because there's a lot to choose from. But yeah, those are two names off the top of my head.
All right, let's take one from Papa Guzzo. He wants to know, do you think the Giants trade Saquon Barkley? I think they should keep him. You know what? I don't think the Giants are going to trade Barkley. I mean, I can make a case for doing so, but realistically, I don't think they're going to do it for a number of reasons. And I've got to start off with, they've got to get this offense off the ground. And, he's Joe Shane, Brian Dable have spoken about how they're putting plays in place for Barkley. And if they were going to move him, would they necessarily go through that whole process? I'm not so sure they would. But more importantly, here's the other thing. This is all about determining what you have in Daniel Jones. So you need that offense to be operating and firing on all cylinders. I don't know that it necessarily makes sense to move a key playmaker in Barkley, who's more than just a running back. He could be a threat out of the backfield. And then, here's the other thing. What would you get in return for him? Now, if you're not going to get anything higher than, say, a 4th round pick, well, you know what? You might as well hang on to him. And if he's not in your plans for the long term, you let him walk. Maybe if you're lucky and he signs a really big contract and the circumstances fall together, you get a 3rd round comp pick the following year. I mean, that's how I see it kind of playing out.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you. I think the people that want to get rid of Barkley this year, they just want to they basically just want to be done with the Gettleman era. They're like, we hated that he took a running back 2nd overall, trade him for a coffee pot for all I care. But that's not smart business. You'd be selling extremely low. This is as low as his value will ever be. There's really no benefit to trading Barkley before the year starts unless somebody gives more than what I think that we would get. Like you said, I think the most the New York Giants would get right now for Barkley, being that he only has a year left on his contract, being that he has not been the running back that people expected him to be since really his rookie season with some of the injuries that he's had to deal with, is a 4th round pick. So why am I going to do that? This year, you hope that you improve the offensive scheme with some of the guys you brought in. He's a year more removed from the injury. You hope that he improves and gets better as a football player, and then maybe the stock increases. Maybe you're able to trade him midseason for, say, a 2nd round pick for a team desperate to compete for a Super Bowl. Or, like you said, if he improves, you're going to get a comp pick probably at least equal to what you would get if you traded him now this year. So people talk about the $7 million in savings because because of the cap restrictions. But the way I look at it is this: we're not going to be competing for a Super Bowl this year anyway. So what is the $7 million really going to do? Now, some people may argue that well, you'd be able to keep James Bradberry, but James Bradberry is not going to be here past this year, even if you were to keep him. And Bradberry's got a higher market right now than Barkley. So you trade the player with the higher market, you get what you can, and you draft his replacement. I think that's the way that the New York Giants should and will go.
I agree with you. I mean, again, I can make a case for it, but it's not a strong case. And I think Barkley, you just keep him. I don't think he's going to get a big deal, a big money deal. And the other thing you got to remember, Barkley's 7 million, I think it's 7.2 million, is less than what he counted for last year. Last year, I think he was upwards of 10 million. So it's kind of a reduction if you think about it. I mean, if you're looking to justify him being on the roster, it's really not a bad amount to carry. And I know some of you will say, well, you could split that up and you can get, or you can use that money and get a solid offensive lineman or a pass rusher or this or that. Yeah, but now you create another hole on your offense that I'm not sure you really needed to create.
And you're talking about a 1-year stopgap lineman.
Yeah.
You're not talking about a lineman that's going to be here for 5 or 6 years. Those guys we don't have the money to sign guys like that in free agency.
Yes, exactly. All right. JC Silva wants to know, is Logan Ryan coming back? I think so. I mean, I can't imagine they would cut him. I know last year he dropped off just a little bit from the year before, but still a valuable player, still a guy who could do a lot of things. The leadership, a good locker room guy. I can't see them moving on from him. Can you?
No, I mean, I think they would if they could. The money doesn't add up. They can't. His dead cap is as much as his salary is due to him. So they backloaded the salary a bit, and he'll be back next year with the Giants. I don't see any way in which he's not going to carry any trade market with the money that he makes. So he'll play for the Giants this year. I think they'll probably move on after this year, but he'll be with the Giants this year.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's take one more question here, and then we'll go on to the next topic. Dustin Mosley wants to know, how early would you look to take a wide receiver? Now, for those who missed it, I put an article on Giants Country saying that I think it was Todd McShay had the Giants taking a receiver in the first round. Last week, I took a lot of flack for this, but I also, in a mock draft in which I tried to think outside the box, I had the Giants picking a receiver in the first round, and a lot of you said I was crazy. Well, Todd McShay must be crazy too, because he had the same idea, not the same guy, but the same idea that I had. So that being said, I don't know that they would go receiver in the first round. It's really going to depend on who's on the board. I mean, if Thibodeau's there and the 2 tackles are gone, I'm running for Thibodeau.
Yeah.
If Thibodeau is not there, the 2 tackles are gone, Sauce is there, maybe I run for Sauce. I mean, how would you plan it out, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to write off any possibilities. We do need a wide receiver. I'm just not necessarily in favor of drafting one in the first round this year after we took Tony last year, signed Golladay. I think we have more pressing needs on the offensive line, the edge rusher, the linebacker. But I'm not going to rule it out as a possibility, especially if we're able to trade down. If you're able to trade down to that 12, 13, 14 area, we potentially could. If we're in love with one of these wide receivers, take one in the first round. Me right now, if you ask me today what I'm looking for in the draft, I want the Giants with those 2 picks to come out of it with a tackle and a defensive playmaker. That's what I want. I want a tackle and a defensive playmaker. How you go about doing that, we'll see. Worst case scenario, I think, is Cross and Sauce, which rhymes. I can make T-shirts about it, but I think you're looking at a tackle and a defensive playmaker, whether that be the edge rusher or the cornerback. That's what I want as a Giants fan. Or potentially trade down, like I said, and get future draft capital.
Right, absolutely. And this is all subject to change because now we've got free agency coming up, and let's see how that pans out. Now, speaking of free agency, I put this question on my Twitter feed yesterday. I'm going to put it to you, Chris, and also if anybody wants to chime in who's watching the show, feel free. Now, you go back to last year and what the Giants did with the offensive line. Gettleman was all about let the kids play, and we have all these veteran backups to as a safety net, if you will, in case they falter. And it turns out, of course, they needed the veteran backups because they did falter. This year, would anybody necessarily object to the Giants taking a reverse approach? In other words, get veterans, mostly veterans, to play on that offensive line. Now, again, if you've got a chance at Neal or Ikwanu, get him, that's fine. But mostly stack up that line with veterans, even if it's on a short-term deal, because this is a big make or break year for Daniel Jones. They've got to protect them here, and then maybe use some of your picks from round 2 onward to get developmental guys who maybe aren't going to be ready for day 1, but ultimately can step in and then give you a nice offensive line moving forward for a couple of years. Would you go that path if you had that opportunity?
I wouldn't be upset if they went that way. I think that is a realistic approach that they could take. You sign a couple of guys to 1-year deals in free agency to fill a couple holes on the line. No matter what, I don't think they're going to be able to fill all 4 vacancies through the draft. I think they're going to have to, pick and choose some of the guys that are currently on the roster. Maybe they feel Lemieux could be good coming back off the injury. He's in the starting lineup. Sign 1 or 2 free agents on 1-year deals to fill some holes. And maybe you do go that route. Maybe, like I said earlier, you double up on the defense and then you start to attack the offensive line heavily in the second and third round. But my line of thinking is, if you have the opportunity to take a tackle that is pretty much a sure thing, if you're taking him 5th overall, he better be pretty much a sure thing in this year's draft. I want to get that done with. I want to get the 2 bookend tackles. I want to have my right and left side situated. And then the rest of the pieces could, kind of fill itself out. You could find interior offensive linemen in free agency. And if you have 2 really good tackles, it's going to improve the rest of the offensive line. So if you have the ability to be able to get a good right tackle prospect, I think especially in a year where I think it's a developmental year. It's not a year in which I expect the New York Giants to compete for the Super Bowl and the playoffs. You got to start building that foundation to set the next quarterback up for success. So my preference is get a tackle with one of those 2 picks. But I'm also not a guy that is so, I don't have tunnel vision where I don't see other possibilities. I do think there are other possibilities. And doubling up on the defense could be a logical route to go. I think, like you said, though, if you do that, you got to go 2 out of the next 3 picks have to be linemen. You have 2 third-round picks and an early second-round pick. I think 2 out of the next 3 would have to be linemen.
All right. Now, just the listeners that are weighing in here, JC Silva would rather control the O-line for 4 to 5 years of salary. I'm guessing you mean, JC, that you would rather them take younger players. Problem with that is if you stock up with all young players in one swoop, now they're all going to probably have to be paid at the same time. And you're not going to be able to do that. So I would rather it be in piecemeal myself personally from a business perspective. So that's the approach I would take. Now let's see. Lloyd Goldstein says it depends on what we have in cap money. I know there will be free agents available. You're right, Lloyd. I mean, Roger Saffold is going to be a free agent. I think he's not going to be. I think he's going to be released. That's a guy I don't think the Giants can afford. As much as I saw that and I was like, oh boy, I would love to see them get him. Yeah. I don't think they're going to be able to afford him. I know the center from Baltimore was a guy that was linked to the Giants. I don't think they'll be able to afford him. I mean, if you can only take one free agent offensive lineman, Chris, who are you looking at what position?
I think I'm looking at a guard in terms of the position, or a center, an interior offensive lineman. I don't think we have the money to be able to sign an impact tackle in free agency. Maybe you could get a solid guard in free agency, similar to what Baltimore did last year with our player when they were able to bring him in on a 2 or 3 year deal with Kevin Zeitler. The guard market is much more affordable than the tackle market. So I think that's what I'm looking at, mainly due to the fact that we're kind of, we don't have much to spend. So I think I'd be looking at a guard. I know the Bills just dropped, what's his, I think it's Feliciano.
Yes, Feliciano.
So obviously natural ties there due to the fact Shane came from there. Maybe he's a guy we look at, but I think I'm looking at an interior offensive lineman in terms of, if we're going to bring in an impact player on the offensive line in free agency.
Right. Now, an argument that I always make, and it's interesting, I'm going to put Lloyd's follow-up, Daniels from the Bears is young and graded well. I don't think they'll be able to afford Daniels, Lloyd, but an argument I've always made is if you're going to go interior offensive lineman, get somebody who can play guard or center, all 3 positions, because that gives you flexibility, So now when you go into the draft, you could say, okay, I have a guy who could play both guards and center if I need him to. And now as you fill in, you're like, okay, I got my tackle, hopefully. And then maybe in the later rounds, you pick up a guard. And now you could say, okay, I'm going to move this free agent. Initially, I was thinking putting him at right guard. I'm going to move him to center, which to me makes sense.
Yeah, similar to Nick Gates, a guy that you could, before the injury, a guy that you can move around at all the positions.
Yeah. You want to have flexibility on that offensive line. And I think most interior offensive linemen, they do play guard and center. So that's nothing new there. I mean, I don't think Nick Gates is going to be ready to go, if at all, this year. I would be very, very surprised if he's ready to play this year. I hope he is. Don't get me wrong, but I know when I saw him in December,
Yeah.
and I realized 3 months or so have passed, he was walking with a very, very heavy limp. No, and looked nowhere near being ready to run. So I just don't. And even if he is ready, I've always thought that Gates was a better guard than center.
Yeah, yeah, his snapping always gave me headaches, especially when he first started at the position. I was always worried he was going to snap it over the quarterback's head. And yeah, like you said, I was actually excited when they moved him over to guard. Ironically enough, that's the game that he got hurt when they moved him back over to guard, because I thought, like you said, I thought he was better suited to play that position. I am not banking on Nick Gates at all. I've seen a lot of New York Giants fans be like, they're just penciling him into the starting lineup. No, the guy's coming off a major 7 surgeries to his leg. So you don't know if he's ever going to be the same player again, unfortunately. I know he's a fan favorite. I love him. He's tough as nails, but I'm not banking on him, not just for next year, but for long term, to be an answer on that offensive line. I don't know. I mean, I hope, but I'm not gonna, if I'm the GM, I'm not expecting it. If it's a pleasant surprise, great, but I have to at least, plan for the unfortunate reality that he may never be the same player again.
Yeah, well, I mean, think Rich Seibert. That's what this whole thing kind of reminds me of. Richie fought his way back. Gates is cut from the same cloth, I think, as Richie Seibert as far as toughness goes. But, you got to think Richie wasn't quite the same, even though he came back and he started and he was good enough to win a Super Bowl, help them win a Super Bowl. And, but it's going to be tough. It really is. I mean, but listen, if I had to put money on anybody coming back from that kind of injury, you got to put it on Gates.
I love Gates.
I love the guy too.
And I'm going to be rooting for him and hoping, but you also got to plan accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Let's get a question up here from Dwayne Lowry. How early do you see us drafting a linebacker? Wow.
It's tough to say.
That is tough to say. Definitely not. You know what? I'm going to say not on day 1. Day 2, I don't know, maybe by round 3 at the soonest. Would that make the most sense, you think? I mean, I know it depends on who's on the board.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking like by the 3rd round. I mean, see, I think also a lot's going to depend on what happens with Blake Martinez.
That's what I was going to start with. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Martinez, remember, he's coming off. He should be okay off the ACL. But here's the other thing. Do you re-sign? You've got Tay Crowder, who's under contract. He was a starter last year. Now you also have Jalen Smith, who kind of flashed a little bit. Do you maybe have to choose between one of those 2 guys as one of your inside linebackers in the base? And then if you don't have Martinez, now do you get a free agent? Do you draft? I mean, what do you do there?
Yeah, it's tough to say. Like, in terms of where they're going to, I think they will draft an inside linebacker. But in terms of when they will, I don't think it'll be in the 1st round unless we trade down. If we trade down, anything becomes a possibility. If we trade down to like 20 with the Steelers, which people have said that they are enamored with Malik Willis, maybe they give us an insane package and we trade that far back. Yeah, it's possible we could take Lloyd or Nakobe Dean, but realistically speaking, I don't expect one in the 1st round. 2nd round, if a guy like Nakobe Dean falls, maybe. I think you go more towards BPA as the draft prolongs. So we'll see. But I do not expect an inside linebacker in the 1st round. After that, your guess is as good as mine. I think it comes down to their draft board. How they get the players ranked on, and who's available. And if a middle linebacker is the best player on their board, they certainly could take one in the 2nd round, but not in the 1st.
Right. Agree. All right. So Mimo Melo, what do you guys think about Carter and Jay Smith at linebacker? Okay. 2 different positions there. Carter's outside. Smith is inside. Carter is unrestricted. And let's talk about Carter, because this is an interesting one. Do you resign Carter given what he showed in those last 4 games when he apparently seemed to quote unquote get healthy? And that's interesting. People say, oh, he started to get healthy the last 4 games. Oh, you mean to tell me magically after playing a long season he started to get healthy? I mean, wouldn't you think the reverse would happen?
Yeah, Carter's an interesting one. He's the only one that I think is even a question of the big four of the free agents that are available for the Giants. That includes Hernandez, that includes Ingram, and that includes who am I forgetting? Peppers. I think those three are gone.
Yeah.
Carter's a possibility he could be back. I do think he fits this scheme very well. It comes down to the market for me. If there's any kind of market for Carter, sayonara. He's a guy that has shown that he has injury troubles. He's a guy that has shown that he has not quite lived up to the expectations. Some of it obviously due to the injuries he sustained, but he has not quite lived up to the expectations us as Giants fans were hoping for. But when you watch him play, especially with the way that he ended the season, maybe it did take him some time to recover from the injury, and then he started to find his stride. And he's certainly a guy with upside. And with the proper coaching, I do think he would fit very well in the Don Wink Martindale defense. So we'll see. I think it comes down to market for me, though. If a team's willing to give him a 3-year deal, $8-9 million a year, you let him go, you get your comp pick. But if there's not much of a market, maybe you bring him back on a 2-year salary for $5 or $6 million a year. So it comes down to the market.
Yeah, I don't know that I would give him that much. I if anything, I might say 1-year prove it deal.
Yeah, well, 1 year, maybe a 2-year with the ability to get out after one.
But again, this draft class is so loaded in defensive pass rushers.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. And JC Silva, by the way, said, "Oh, same with Zimenez." I think Zimenez is gone. I'm sorry, he hasn't worked out.
I've never been a huge fan of Zimenez.
But here's the thing. Now, just going back to Carter. It's a loaded draft class, and then here's what we kind of don't know: does Martindale put more of a priority on the back end of the defense for the pass rush, guys that can hold the coverage? So therefore, does that mean that cornerbacks are going to be more of a premium for the Giants than the guys up front? That's what we're kind of trying to figure out, I think.
And I think it will be. You look at what Baltimore did. They let go of so many pass rushers on that team, right? Zadarius Smith, several others. But what they made sure they did during his tenure there with the Ravens, they always had a really strong secondary. And this year, when the secondary went down, you saw that defense regress tremendously. So I think that will be the focal point. I think Wink is going to say to himself, I could generate pressure through the blitz, through my scheme, through deception. I need to have strong coverage play. So I think that they're going to prioritize a strong secondary.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. It just makes too much sense. And like I said, it's a loaded class with pass rushers. I mean, it's interesting how this year it looks like that the various positions in the draft class match up with what the Giants need as far as depth. Like, in other words, the Giants aren't going to be like, oh my God, we better grab a pass rusher here, because afterwards there's like a huge drop off between, our top rated guy and the second guy on our board.
Right. It is a very deep class at the edge rusher position specifically. When I looked at the board, I'm like, wow, like Jermaine Johnson's a really good player. A lot of people have him going late first. It is at that position specifically, it's a very deep class.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Dustin Mosley, any updates on Shane Lemieux's injury? No, Dustin, I don't have anything. Guys have been kind of scattered around. I know they've been coming in for checkups. They've been coming in to do rehab, some of them. I don't know if Lemieux has been in recently. So unfortunately, I don't have anything to give you on that. The only thing I have heard is that he should be good to go, if not at the start of camp, shortly thereafter.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. If you haven't heard it, I haven't heard it. So, but yeah, I haven't heard any updates on Lemieux either. Hopefully he's ready to go. Hopefully he's at least ready to be a depth lineman for the Giants.
Yeah, I mean, look, when he was in there, he needed some work. I think I can't help but wonder if maybe he was pressed into action before he was ready. Because sometimes that happens with these younger guys. There's an injury, or, in Lemieux's case, he had to step in for a guy that had COVID, and Will Hernandez. So sometimes they're just not ready to step in. It's like, oh my God, we've got to get this guy ready. We've got to expedite, get him in there, push him in there, and then hope for the best. So I think that's kind of what happened there.
Yeah, I thought that too in his rookie year. I thought, and they had to, like you said, because Hernandez had COVID. But I thought they probably brought him in there before he was ready. And he actually looked good. And I'm not a Lemieux fan. I was not I was not ecstatic that he was going to be in the starting lineup going into next year, but the limited time that he was out there before he got hurt, he actually looked pretty good in that first game.
Yeah, he did. He did, definitely. Now, it's interesting. I don't think the Giants are going to bring back Will Hernandez, nor should they. But I
Yeah.
did have somebody ask me offline and said, "Hey, ask DaEntertainah what he thinks about this. What happened to Hernandez? He looks so promising as a rookie, and he just went backwards." And it wasn't so much the physical aspect of it as it was, I think, more the mental part of his game. Is it because they had different systems coming in? Was it just because, Hernandez came from a smaller school? I mean, what do you think went wrong with him? Why he went backwards the way he did?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. Like you said, different offensive line coaches, different blocking schemes. Also, let's remember he played a different position this year. They shifted him from the left to right side. Never played on that side before. And it's not like he had a lot of help on the line either, right? I mean, he had Nate Solder on his left side there at the start of his career. We all know Nate Solder struggled mightily. I think he surrendered 9 sacks his first year with the Giants. Then he goes to the right side. He's got Nate Solder again. He can't get away from him. So I think that had something to do with it as well. I think it was a combination of a lot of things, and he probably was not as good as we thought he was going to be either.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's take another question here from JC Silva. Any inexpensive wide receiver free agents out there you'd like to see Shane target? We need depth outside. Ooh, I haven't really looked at the receiver, the free agent to be receiver group. Have you, Chris?
Yeah, one guy I'll mention, and I don't know what his market's going to be. There's 2 guys. You got McKenzie from the Bills, which obviously there's familiarity there, so maybe. The other guy I've seen mentioned is Pringle. I don't know what his market's going to be, but Kafka, of course, coming over from the Chiefs. I've seen the Giants and him linked together as a possibility. Those are 2 names I'll throw out there. I don't know if they're going to sign any of them, but those are 2 names.
Okay, yeah, that's something to keep an eye on because they have a bunch of guys that they're bringing back. The Bachmans, I think, David Sills, and look, those are all great feel-good stories. But if they haven't taken that next step after all these years, at some point you got to say, okay, look, let's bring in a new batch of guys and see what we get out of those guys. So, all right, another question here from Art Vendele, Seinfeld fan. Going off of the Hernandez topic, we've seen a lot of promising players regress with the Giants. Do you think the team has difficulty cultivating talent? This is interesting. This was a question I asked to Tony Pauline when he was on the show. I said, what's been the problem? And he said, look, it's been a combination of picks and coaching, and I think that's certainly fair. Last year they had Rob Sale come in as the offensive line coach, and I don't want to crap all over Rob Sale. He was a good guy and everything like that. But as the year went on, I know I began to have questions about whether or not he was the right fit, or if it was just because he was a Joe Judge buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Is that why he was there? You know what I'm saying? I know that sounds terrible, but I just wonder about some of the coaching, because the offensive line coaching, if you think about it, Flaherty was really the last time they had a solid coach there. Then they went to Hal Hunter, Mark Colombo, who's not a horrible coach, but I don't know if he was necessarily a fit for what they wanted to do.
And him and Joe Judge clashed, right? So
I know. And then you had Googs, and then Rob Sale. So, I mean, do you agree that maybe that was part of the problem, that the coaching just kind of wasn't there for this unit?
I think that's more of the problem than the talent itself. If I'm being honest. Now, the talent needs an upgrade, don't get me wrong, but you think of the most important thing with an offensive line is continuity, playing together. That also includes the coaching staff, learning a scheme, building, especially when you have a young unit. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And all you got to do is look at some of the linemen that have left the Giants. Eric Flowers got a lot better when he left the New York Giants. And so I think that has a lot to do with it. And that was the major reason. And I don't know anything about him, but that was the major reason I liked the hire that they made for the offensive line coach this year, because you have to figure he's going to be here for a few years because he's worked. It's not like Colombo with Judge. Colombo had no familiarity with Judge. Judge and him clearly didn't like one another. Here, you're talking about a guy that has worked with Dable, with the Buffalo Bills, and you have to figure he's going to be here for a few years. So I think that's important, that they're going to have a guy for more than 1 year. That's been a major problem with the offensive line coach for the Giants here. So I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. And you know what? While we're on that topic, I do want to mention the coaching staff, because last time I think we were talking, the coaching staff wasn't even assembled. The coaching staff is in place now. And I don't know about you, but I like this staff. And, I know I said this in the past about what Judge put together because it was all teachers and stuff. But in retrospect, those were guys that a lot of them came from the college ranks, didn't really have as much experience dealing with the pros. If you look at the group that Dable has assembled, a lot of those guys don't have direct ties to him. They're guys maybe he knew of that he brought on board because he liked their approach. B, I think with the exception of one guy, and I think it's the running back coach, they've all had maybe an equal balance, if you will, of coaching at the college level and at the pro level, which I think is important. What are your thoughts on this coaching staff that Dable has put together?
Yeah, I like it. And like you said, it's much more experienced in terms of the NFL level. You look at all the coaches that Judge brought in. Graham had obviously some experience at the NFL level. So did Garrett. But a lot of the coaches, like you said, came directly from the college ranks. This is a much more experienced staff. And I think they were really in high demand. Kafka brings a innovative mind. He's more with the times than, say, a guy like Jason Garrett. And I do think he fits our personnel much better. So I like the coaching staff. Again, I'm not going to go over the top like I did when we hired Judge. I was very excited. It was fresh. It was new. And I think a lot of Giants fans got that way. I think we're going in cautiously optimistic, and that's the way we should go in. But at the same time, give these guys an opportunity to see if they could get the job done. I also thought that Dable was the right hire. I don't know if he's going to be a great head coach, but I thought it was the correct line of thinking. I thought that the Giants had to go with an offensive-minded head coach due to the fact that we talk about familiarity, especially when you're bringing in a young quarterback, whether it's Jones after this year or whether it's going to be drafting a quarterback in 2023. You want to be able to not do what we did to Daniel Jones, where he has to go through scheme after scheme after scheme. If you hire a head coach, he's going to be here. If you hire an offensive coordinator, he could get a job after a year or two. So I thought it was the right decision to go with an offensive-minded head coach.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with you. All right, folks, I do have to run a quick commercial. We will be right back. We will continue to take your questions. We've got so much more to talk about. We're going to go roughly another hour. Bear with me. This will be a quick commercial, everybody. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast, our special 2-hour roster building season live with DaEntertainah. But first, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline.net is also the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news, whether it's basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, or your favorite Vegas games. And with March Madness just getting ready to start, you'll definitely want to check out all the information they have to offer. So head on over to the website today, betonline.net, and learn more about the trends and the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. All right. Thank you, everybody. I do have one more commercial to run, but we'll run it later. So
you're doing great. Yeah, I'm entertained by the commercial.
Would you believe it took me literally 5 takes to do these commercials last night?
I believe it. When I do the videos, a lot of times.
Oh my gosh.
5 takes. So
I have done those commercials. I can't tell you how many times. Like literally, they're regular sponsors of the show. BetOnline, Built Bar, regular sponsors, Rock Auto. And last night, I was laughing. It took me like 5 takes to get through them. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God. And my husband's making fun of me in the next room going, oh my God, you suck. I'm just laughing my butt off. But ultimately, I got it right. See, the bad thing about video is, with the commercials, I have to have a script. And if I don't have a script in front of me, that's why it always looks like I'm reading it. So I'm like, if I don't have that script, I'm just not a natural with commercials. But anyway, all right. You got Traina and the Taina here on the Locked On Giants podcast. We've got a live 2-hour show. We're about an hour in. We're going to go another hour as we keep y'all company for lunch. Those of you who are on the East Coast having lunch, hope you save us something. Because, we're going to have lunch
I'm
soon.
starving. Give me some pizza.
Hey, yeah, pizza day. Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's Friday. It's pizza day. All right. So, Taina, let's talk about the tight end situation because the Giants cut Rudolph, which we expected. I don't see Evan Ingram coming back. But, it was interesting. Somebody said to me, well, I can make a case for Evan Ingram coming back. And I said, what? And then the person made the case and said, in this offense and how, with Kafka coming in and how Kansas City used Kelsey, maybe they can come out with a role similar to that where, Ingram could be the big slot receiver. Now, nobody's saying that Ingram is the next Kelsey. I want to make that perfectly clear because he's not. But if the Giants had money, would you want Evan Ingram back, knowing, the injury history, the history of the drops and all that stuff? Or are you at the point now where you just say, see ya?
You want to clear this chat out real quick. Say that you want to bring back Evan Ingram because Giants fans can't wait to get rid of the guy. One thing I thought that was interesting with the Giants is I don't think they're gonna have a fullback this year. They talked about not bringing back Penny. I think they're gonna go with the H-back role, like you said. And I do think Evan Ingram does provide value, and I do think he'd fit this scheme relatively well. But good news for Giants fans that don't want Evan Ingram back. We don't have the money to retain him. I think there's going to be a team that's willing to give him $7, $8, $9 million a year. And the good news is we'll get a compensation pick for that. If Ingram was willing to come back for $2 or $3, $4 million with the lack of weapons that the Giants have, and I do think he would fit what they're looking to do relatively well. I'd be open to it. But for what I think he's gonna be able to get on the open market, I don't think he'll be back with us.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And, listen, it's really a shame because I've said this so many times on the show, excuse me, and I've written this. Ingram's not a baghead. He works his tail off, but doggone it, I just don't know what it is with him. Not just in terms of the injury thing. I mean, I don't like to slam a guy for injuries, but the drops, the concentration drops. And I don't know, is it because of the routes they're asking him to run? Is it because, he's afraid to get hit because he's been injured so much? I just don't know what the answer is. I mean, when you watch him on tape, Chris, do you see anything that kind of suggests?
I think it's mental. I do. I think it's mental. And I think the other thing about Ingram is if I were him, I'd want a fresh start. I mean, it hasn't worked here. You're playing for a losing franchise. You're now entering another scheme. Daniel Jones is not the most attractive quarterback. If I was Ingram, the fan base hates me. They booed me at the game. Why in the world would I come back here? I take a discount to leave the New York Giants. So I don't think it makes sense on either side. So I really don't think Evan Ingram's coming back here.
Yeah, I don't see it either. And again, shame that it didn't work out with that kid because, that's the type of kid
he
you like to
seems like
root
a great
for.
guy. Like,
He's fantastic.
When I do the live streams, I do the play-by-play during the game, and I try not to kill him when I do it because I genuinely think he's a good person. Like, I want to root for him. I want him to be successful. He's one of those players that it hasn't come together, at least with the Giants, and maybe a change of scenery will improve.
Wouldn't that be a kick in the butt, right? Can you just see it now?
It's going to happen.
Of course you know it's going to happen. How many times has it happened recently?
Yeah.
And here's the other thing, the other argument that, if you want to make an argument for why Ingram hasn't worked out with the Giants, how many position coaches has he had and how many offensive coordinators has he had since he's been here?
Too many.
Yeah. You don't think that's not a problem?
Yeah. And the crazy thing is if we retain Ingram, which I don't think we will, he would go through 3 different GMs and still find a way to keep his job, even though 99% of the fan base can't wait to get rid of the guy.
I know it's really a shame because, like I said, that's the type of guy you root for. And, but it's interesting because I think I saw a report that Buffalo might be interested in him.
I think it's a good fit.
That is a good fit. I think so too.
Yeah. I actually mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. I know they got Knox, who's a solid tight end, but Ingram brings a different dynamic to that offense. I think it's a really good fit.
Yeah. But, here's the other thing, with regards to the tight end situation, the Bills last year, I believe, led the league in 11 personnel. I think they played it something like 71% of the time, which was tops. Now, I'm not saying that the new Giants offense is going to strictly be an 11 personnel base, if you will. But to me, it would suggest that there's more of a premium on the need for receivers and tight ends. Yes, we've got to have them, but correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think the tight ends were as big of a factor in the Bills' offense. Am I right?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. And which would mean that you would think it wouldn't be as big of a factor here, right? Dable's coming over from the
You would
Bills.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm curious to see because this draft class for the tight ends, there's no Kyle Pitts in this class. I think we
No.
can all agree on
But
that.
what I will say is, at least from what I've read and some of the things I've seen, it is one of the best overall tight end classes in a very long, or at least on par with recent draft classes. It's thought to be a good tight end class, but like you said, there's not like a top tier one where you look at prior drafts, like you said with Pitts, Hockenson. There's not a tight end like that in this year's draft.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're going to do draft a tight end, maybe day 3. I mean, I don't know that you even
I
go
could see
day
day
2.
2. I could see third round.
Yeah,
I could.
maybe.
I don't think second, but I could see third round.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Because don't they have 2 third
Yeah, they
round
have 2
picks?
third-round picks.
Yeah, that's right.
Potentially 3 if we trade Bradberry.
Yes, I keep forgetting that because that third round is actually it's been a barren wasteland for the Giants last several years, but hopefully that changes as they go
If we
forward.
have 3 third-round picks, though, in this hypothetical scenario, because I think we both agree we're going to trade Bradberry, I think you have to trade up. I whether it be to the back end of the first or another second-round pick, you got to use a couple of those picks to move up and try to get an impact player.
Yeah, definitely. And just going back to Ingram and the drops, how much of that do you think was on the quarterback as opposed to Ingram, having that mental block or concern that he was going to get hit?
I mean, I'm sure maybe not all the blame's on Ingram, but I think you got to put most of it. It's the NFL at the end of the day. It's not college football. If the ball hits your hands, I don't care if it's not perfect. You're making millions of dollars. If it hits your hands and you can catch it, you better come down with that ball. And there were way too many. And I think the thing that kills Ingram, he may not make more mistakes. Well, he definitely does, but he may not have that many more drop balls than like the average tight end. But it just feels like every time he does, it's catastrophic. Like something horrible happens, whether it bounces off his hands, lands in the defender's hands. You think back to the Eagles game where it would have sewn up the game a couple of years ago. It seems like his mistakes happen at the worst times possible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that definitely puts the spotlight glare on that. So, all right, folks, make sure you get your questions in. We're going to sprinkle them in this final hour. Let's take a question from Eddie Goomba. Wants to know what pick. I think you meant, pick at made at 5 would make you instantly worried about Shane's ability to draft well. A punter?
Yeah, they better not draft a punter. Listen, I don't want a quarterback.
I don't either. That. Yeah, not in this class.
I'm gonna get if they do take a quarterback, I'm gonna give them the opportunity to do a good job, and I'm gonna say to myself, all right, that's Joe Shane's guy. He's willing to put his job on the line for that quarterback, and hopefully he's right. But I would question the pick. I don't want a quarterback at 5th overall with all the holes on this team. But if they feel Malik Willis could be the next Josh Allen, best of luck. Hopefully you're right. So I'm not going to say I would kill him for it, but I'd be questionable. Wide receiver as well. I don't want to take a wide receiver top 5. Not with the needs this team currently has. But again, regardless of what he does, it's year 1. I'm going to let him start to build this team the way that he sees fit.
Yeah. Now it's interesting because a lot of people, when we talk about the roster moves that are coming up, I guess Giant fans, and I don't blame them, but they're so conditioned to the bad years that we've had this past decade, which is just, with the exception of a couple of spots, has been abysmal. And they're like, well, why should we believe? Why should we think that things are going to be different this time? And the only response I can give that makes any sense is that they finally went outside the building. Excuse me. And going outside the building, getting in different perspectives.
Yeah.
From teams that have won. It's big.
Yeah, no, I listen, I'm not going to be overly optimistic, but at the same time, you got to give these guys a fair opportunity. What other choice do you have as a fan base? And you also have to realize it's not going to be fixed year 1. Like, don't expect these guys to come in and everything's going to be rainbows and butterflies. We talk about how bad of a job Gettleman did, and he did. The last 10 years between the second half of Jerry Reese's career and Gettleman's tenure with the Giants, it's probably the worst period of history for a decade in New York Giants history in terms of the GM spot. So it's not going to be fixed overnight. It's going to take some time. They're going to get rid of the players they don't want, and I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to be patient and give these guys an opportunity, much like I was with Gettleman. Gettleman failed. You have to hope that these guys succeed. And like you said, the good news is this time around, the refreshing part is it seemed like it was an actual search. Last time around, it was not. They brought in 2 guys that were currently with the squad, and they brought in a former New York Giants employee and Louis Riddick. This time around, they picked from the best organizations. They interviewed these guys, and it did have a different feel to it. So that's the way I look at it. I'm going to go an optimistic, but at the same time, they got to prove themselves, and I'm going to give them 3 years to do so.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I apologize, folks. Throat's getting a little dry here. So I've got my water. I'm halfway through it. So I apologize for that little coughing check. All right. This comment popped up. BJ, they're going to suck this year, then suck next year with a rookie quarterback. Then everyone gets fired. Get your quarterback this year and save yourself. I'm not sure I understand the logic there of what's being said, but there's not a quarterback in this class that excites me to take in the top 10, to take it 5 or you get maybe a developmental pick, I suppose. I mean, the Bills did that, if you think about it, with what's his name?
Josh Allen.
No. Josh Allen was a development pick. Jake Fromm. That's what I'm thinking of.
Fromm.
They took him in the 5th round. And they developed him or tried to develop him until the Giants poached him. That's how I could see this going. I could see the Giants potentially drafting a quarterback to develop. I mean, would that cause you to throw the remote if they did that?
In the first round, I'm not going to throw my remote no matter what. It's a new GM. I'm going to give them the opportunity. First round is I would not be ecstatic if they took a quarterback in the first round. I'll say that. Yes. If they want to take a quarterback in the 3rd, 4th round, have at it. I just want to read that comment. He says they're gonna suck this year, then suck next year with a rookie quarterback. Then everyone gets fired. Get your quarterback this year and save yourself. Okay, BJ, here's what I'll say. This is just my opinion. Everybody's got their own opinions, right? My opinion is, if I was the GM, I think drafting a quarterback this year puts unnecessary pressure on my job, because the second I draft that quarterback, if he doesn't succeed, I'm more than likely losing my job. So the way I look at it, BJ, is this year it's pressure free. The fan base, for the most part, knows this team, like you said, is going to suck. So if I was the GM, I look to fix the other pieces on this team, especially being that I probably don't view this quarterback class as being upper echelon. I try to fill in the offensive line. I try to get an edge rusher. I try to fill in the other holes on this team. And then I get my quarterback in the following draft, and he comes into a better situation. I'm not saying it's ideal, but a better situation than a rookie quarterback would come into this year. And then the pressure starts to mount for me as a GM next year when I bring in my quarterback, but at least he's better set up for success. That's the way I look at it. That's why I would not be in a rush if I was a GM in this year's draft class to take a quarterback. That's my take on the situation. Everybody has their own opinion.
Yeah, I say if you're going to take a quarterback, do it right. I mean, look, I think it's fair to say the Giants probably overdrafted Daniel Jones based on what we have seen so far.
I just want to answer this too. I saw Ron once said, Chris, if you draft a quarterback next year, the pressure will still be the same. It will be, but it will be in a more ideal circumstance because I will have addressed my offensive line another year. We saw Pat with Andrew Thomas. It took some time for him to develop, right? You take your lineman this year. It's going to take a little time for him to develop. That quarterback now comes into a better built offensive line, a better situation. That's the way I look at it. Everybody's got their own opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer until you see the final results. And then, people might disagree with what you did. And if you end up winning a Super Bowl, it's like, who's going to argue with you, right? So, All right, let's get this question here from Duran Osman. Excuse me. Would you be upset if the Giants pick Gardner and I'm assuming it's Kyle Hamilton with the 5th and 7th pick under the condition that they hit on an offensive line in the later rounds? Would I be upset with that? Again, it depends. If Ikwonu and Neal are off the board, no, I don't think so. Because to me, the back end of the defense is what they need to really kind of add to. But, then I also would have to say I would need to see what ends up happening with free agency.
Yeah, I think it's circumstantial, like you said. For me, if Ikwonu or Neal are there, that's who I'm going to be. That's who I'm going to want on draft night at the 5th pick. If they're both off the board, which a lot of people are projecting they may be, you take the best available player. You take the difference maker. And listen, at the end of the day, if you get Kyle Hamilton, who many feel is the best overall prospect in this draft, even though he may not play the most attractive position, Joe Shane talked about positional value. more, if you go by that, you're not going to take a safety in the top 5 picks. But if you're enamored with the guy, you feel like he can play multiple positions, he fits your defense well, and you get an impact corner in Sauce Gardner, suddenly your secondary for the long-term future looks really good. And you got a young corner in Adoree Jackson as well, who could potentially be in the long-term plans for this football team. So, no, I wouldn't be upset about that. If the 2 tackles were off the board, you dramatically improve the back end of your defense. That's going to help. That'll also make guys like Lorenzo Carter, if he's back, for example, look a lot better because you're going to have much stronger coverage long-term. So, no, I would not be upset with that. In an ideal world, though, we get a tackle.
Yeah, I agree. In an ideal world, you got to get a tackle.
Yeah.
I think it would be the first time Shane actually was on a decision-making team that drafted an offensive lineman in the first round. I don't think they did it at all during the 5 years that he was with Brandon Beane in Buffalo.
Yeah, they took.
I think the highest went second round. I think.
Yeah, they took 4, but it was very early second round. They took 4.
Right.
That was the earliest they took a lineman. Now, what I will say, they had, if I'm not mistaken, I think in 2019 they had a lot of cap space, and they used that on a lot of offensive linemen they were able to sign. We don't have that cap space, so we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's take another question here from Mike Gorga. If we trade Bradberry, must we take a cornerback at 5 or 7, or are we deep enough there that the offensive tackles, linebackers, and edge are much bigger needs? All right, Chris, let me ask you this because this kind of relates to that question. Then we'll answer Mike's question here. Aaron Robinson. Now, I was talking to somebody, a friend of mine in the business, and he said, gee, Aaron Robinson, everybody's talking about, if Bradberry gets traded, that's it. They've got to instantly go out and replace him. But what about moving Aaron Robinson to that spot? And my response to them initially was, well, Aaron Robinson was primarily a slot cornerback at UCF. So I said, I don't know if that would necessarily be a fit. So the person said to me, well, why couldn't they move him out there, and coach him up for that? And my feeling, again, comes back to, do I really want to deal with projects as starters? And I would be a little reluctant to take on a project, if you will, a conversion or somebody who maybe doesn't have everything I need. What are your thoughts about that part of the equation?
Yeah, it's a really good. I was distracted because I was reading another comment that I wanted to get to. So I got the gist of it, but again, just ask me the question one more time.
No, I'm just saying, what are your thoughts about potentially having the Giants try out Aaron Robinson?
Oh yeah.
If they move on from Bradberry, considering that he would maybe be a project.
Yeah.
Right off the bat,
like you said at the top of it. I think Robinson was meant to be drafted specifically as a slot corner. Now, if the Giants deem that he could be an outside cornerback, maybe they do go that route. They have some other options too. They drafted Rodarius Williams. There's a couple of other guys, but if you get rid of Bradberry, I think I want especially for this defense, I don't want to be messing around with projects. You want to have as strong cornerback play as you possibly can. The New York Giants are going to blitz like crazy. I think they're going to prioritize that position. I don't think they're going to leave it up to a project because that's what he would be. The guy's not meant to play on the outside. He was drafted to be a slot corner. So I don't think they'll go that route. Before I forget it, I wanted to just get to AC's comment. He says, again, show me what back end in NFL history made a team a Super Bowl champion. I'll wait. Have you ever heard of the Seattle Seahawks?
I saw that comment and I thought that same thing.
Have you ever heard of the Seattle Seahawks? I mean, they had a pretty good secondary. Have you ever heard of the New England Patriots? They built their defense around their secondary. They've never had premium pass rushers. So, and they've all, everybody talks about Tom Brady, rightfully so, but the Patriots have always had an upper echelon defense, and it was built around the secondary. So there are definitely some.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I saw that comment, by the way, and actually I wanted to circle back to it. So I'm glad you jumped on that. You read my mind. All right, let's get back to Mike Gorga's question, though. Must we take a cornerback at 5 or 7 if they trade Bradberry? I don't think you must do anything, to be honest with you. I don't think, again, it depends on who's on the board. I know people don't want to hear that, and they're like, well, duh. But I don't think it'd be, if you create the hole, do you have to fill it? I suppose, but I don't think you can force a pick, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think I don't think you should ever go into a draft saying to yourself, no matter what, I have to take this position. I always give my opinion on what I think they should do, but you go by your board. And I think in the first round, I'm not a guy that believes in just drafting for best available player in the first round. I think you try to match the two if you can, ideally, and maybe if it's close, you go for the bigger need in the first round. That's just my personal opinion. I think as the draft goes along, you draft almost exclusively best available player. But if you feel like a guy is a much better player than, say, the biggest need, so I don't know, say, for example, our biggest need is right tackle with Charles Cross, but you feel Kyle Hamilton is that much better of a prospect, you take him. If it's close, maybe you side more towards need.
All right. Next question we have here is from Pencilman. Do you think Bradberry is worth a 3rd and a 5th round pick? Maybe. I would say conditional 5th. I don't know that. I think 5th might be too low. I would say conditional.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think he's worth at least a 3rd. I'll say that.
Yes, I agree.
With the salary that he's due, maybe you won't get much more than that because he's due to make $21 million this year. Even though they wouldn't have to eat all that, we would have to eat, I think, 12 if we traded him. But he's only got one more year under contract, and he's approaching 30. But I think he's worth at least a 3rd. I'll say that. Whether or not you'll get additional picks, I'm not sure, but at least a 3rd.
Yeah. All right. Now, Chris, one thing we haven't really touched on, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, who cares? So what? But it's kind of important. The Giants moved on from Riley Dixon, rightfully so. So now, there's this question of should they draft this punter? And I apologize, I don't know the kid's name, but
Araiza, I think it is.
Yes, he was really impressive at the combine. So some people are of the opinion, draft him, spend a late round pick on him or something like that. Team's got 9 picks. Would you spend a draft pick on a punter?
Here's what I'll say. And that guy is a fantastic punter. I've had a lot of my subscribers tell me about him, and you can look up his highlights on YouTube. He is a really good punter, not the type of punter that's in every draft. Here's what I'll say. We are not we are not in the position to be able to take a punter before the 6th round. I am all for taking a punter. I've said that now for a while. I want the Giants to draft a punter because it's going to save you a lot of money because you pay him next to nothing. I'd rather draft a punter than sign a punter. But I probably don't want to draft him because I think he's going to go in like the 4th round. He's that good. He's that talented. A lot of people are very high on him, and he's definitely a weapon. But the New York Giants have way too many needs to take a punter before the 6th round.
Yeah. And plus I'm still kind of in Matt Dodge shock, if you will.
Yeah. What was that, 3rd? We took him?
I don't remember, but no, wasn't he a 7th?
Oh, maybe he was later.
Brad Maynard, I think, was a 3rd.
Yeah,
wasn't he?
He was later.
That was way back in the day. I think it was Maynard. And Maynard was worth it, I think, because he went on to be a Pro Bowler, if I'm not mistaken. Even though he didn't last here, I think he had his better years.
We had some good punters on those Super Bowl teams. Fiegels was a really good punter, too.
Yeah.
He pinned people deep. He was one of the best punters I've ever seen.
Oh, Fiegels was an artist.
Yeah, he was great.
He was an artist. I remember when he was getting ready to retire, I begged him to stay on, and I was like, "Don't go." And he goes, "I'm getting old, man." I said, "I know, but it was funny because funny story. He was actually the last player on the team that was older than me. Once he retired, I became older than a lot of the players, and I'm like, oh, So now we're all in that age bracket here where we're in our, most of the writers in the room are late 30s. I don't think we have anybody in their 20s. I'm just trying to think, but I know a lot of people are in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Some people might be even in their 60s. So we got a good range of mix in that room. And it's just like, now we're at the point where we're talking to these young men, and it's like we become parents to them.
Yeah, they could be your kids. Yeah.
Oh, it's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. Okay, another question here. Dustin Mosley, do you think the defensive scheme will be favorable in our division? To me, it seems like Dak and Wentz don't do as well under pressure. Well, I don't think any quarterback really does well under pressure. I mean, I think I know what you're talking about, Dustin, but as a whole, I don't think any quarterback does well if his timing is disrupted, if he's constantly having to look over his shoulder to see who's coming and where the pressure's coming from. So, yeah, I could definitely see the scheme being favorable. I mean, Chris, do you see any downside to what Wink might want to do?
The only downside I see is, and it has nothing to do with our division, just overall, is if we're not able to cover well enough, if you run it as an aggressive as a scheme as I expect Wink to run, you could get torn apart. It could look really ugly. Now, if we're able to cover, it'll be beautiful. We'll be able to get consistent pressure on the quarterback. So, regardless of our scheme, just run a good defense, get pressure on the quarterback. That's the name of the game. Doesn't really matter who you're going up against, right? That's how we beat Tom Brady. Obviously Eli was great on those last drives, but we were able to get pressure throughout that game. So that's the name of the game.
Yeah, and then, just to the point there, some quarterbacks, you can get the pressure on them and they can get the ball out of their hands quickly underneath and stuff. So that's where you want to make sure that the back end of the defense, the back seven, if you will, is really stout back there. Because if you don't have that, you're gonna have a long afternoon, because they're gonna dink and dunk and pick your defense apart if you don't have that coverage back there. And right now, the linebacker crew that they have, and we talked about this earlier, I think they could use an upgrade to get guys in there who are good sideline to sideline range, but most of all, who are decent in coverage. And, I just don't. Crowder is okay.
We've really never had a great.
We've never really had it, at least not in a while.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand. Did the game evolve to where they put less of an emphasis on those guys? I mean, or is it just the Giants, quote unquote, way of doing things that just changed over the years? I don't know the answer. I'm thinking it's the Giants' way.
I think it is too. In today's game, more so than 20 years ago, it is so important to have a guy that could drop back to coverage at the linebacker spot. So that is something we desperately need on this defense. Tight ends are so involved in the modern day, slot receivers, so on and so forth. So we need that. That's a big need on our defense.
Definitely is. I mean, and that goes back to the question of where do you take them, or do you maybe look in free agency? I mean, so many different paths. I mean, you look at this roster building process. Do you go down path A, path B? Do you stay in pat? I mean, I don't know what to do there with linebacker. I'd be inclined to maybe keep Crowder.
Mm-hmm.
Martinez, let's see where he's at. Although, coverage, I'm not so sure if coverage is really his strength, and especially coming off the ACL injury. Smith is more, to me, of a downhill type of guy, really good physical guy who could fill holes and stuff like that. I mean, if I could somehow merge together Smith's skill set and Crowder's, I think we'd have ourselves the perfect linebacker. And speaking of which, people say, oh, what about Bobby Wagner, who the Seahawks just released? They ain't going to be able to afford Bobby Wagner. I'm pretty sure of that.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure he's not quite the player he was, 4 or 5 years ago, but no, I don't see that happening. And the other thing you got to say is, you're talking about a guy that's entering the tail end of his career. What's his incentive to come play for a team that's rebuilding? So,
Exactly.
If I'm him, I'm looking to try to win a Super Bowl, if it's not just about the money. So I don't see that happening.
Exactly. All right, folks, I have one more quick commercial I need to run. And then we'll be back and we'll continue to take your questions and continue talking about ways to build this Giants roster. Hope you're enjoying the show. We'll be back after this. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's live 2-hour roster building spectacular with DaEntertainah. But first, Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, but without the calories and without the sugar. Most Built Bars contain about 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and about 17 grams of protein, and they taste great. Built Bar offers 9 amazing flavors in nut and nut-free variety, plus a rotating limited-time offering of different flavors that changes about every few weeks or so. So head on over to BuiltBar.com and see what their current flavor lineup looks like, and use our special promo code LOCK15 to save 15% off your first order. That's code LOCK15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging in there with us. That's the last of the commercials for the show. So for the rest of the show, we'll talk more roster building. We'll take your questions. I don't know about you, Chris. I'm having a great time. I mean,
I always love coming out here talking with you and talking with the chat, and I might have to get a Built Bar now. It sounds good.
They're pretty good, actually. I have my favorites. There's one flavor in particular, a coconut brownie, that I absolutely love. Whenever I get it.
That's a weird combination. It sounds good.
It's good, dude. Oh, it's one of my favorites.
My favorite Girl Scout cookie is actually the Simone, which is coconut flavored. So I probably like.
Okay, so you would like that. No, it's like when I get those the coconut brownies in there. That's the one Built Bar my husband loves. And then it's like, dude, it's like I get a box and then I go and I go to get a Built Bar and I'm like, half the box is gone. What the heck? You know? So, he's so funny. It's like I get stuff, you know, and he's always dipping into it. So I'm like, okay, you're lucky I share, you know. I'm a good person. What can I say? So all right. Let's get back to the Traina and Taina roster building plan for the New York Giants. And Chris, we haven't talked about the defensive line really in detail. You know, Dexter Lawrence, you know, this is a player who his option year is coming up as well. A lot of people don't talk about that, but he is a first round pick. So like Daniel Jones, the Giants have to make a decision on his option year. I believe the amount is 10 million.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that neighborhood.
I think it was 10.4.
Okay. Yeah. 10.4. That being said, do you pick up his option here or do you say, nah, I think I'm going to let him play it out?
I'll let him play it out. And I like Big Dex, but I didn't draft the guy. I could find another player like him probably in the draft. It's, you know, it's a position you get value in the draft. I let him play it out. And if he gets a big contract elsewhere next year, well, I at least get a comp pick. But I don't think I'm looking to commit another $10 million towards next year's it would be
next year. Yeah, 2023.
Yeah, 2023. Maybe they will. The New York Giants have let a lot of players go specifically at that position. And a lot of people always complain about that. Oh, Dalvin Tomlinson's got, you know, so many players at that position we've let go, but I don't think I'd be willing to commit the fifth year, especially being that I never drafted the guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And not just that, but you know what? Let me put this out here and tell me what you think. And also those of you who are still watching, let me know what you think. I thought Lawrence playing on the outside was a little out of place. I thought his talents, and I think if I'm not mistaken, when he was in college, he played interior.
He did. Yeah.
So I wondered if perhaps maybe a move inside to the nose, you know, because the Giants really haven't had a good solid nose tackle. Might that be a better fit for him? I'm wondering.
It might. I like Dex. I do, but to me, he's been a little bit underwhelming for me. I thought he'd be better. He's good. Like, I don't want anybody to think. I think he's a good player. I think he's one of the better players on our defense. But was he worth the 17th pick? I don't know.
In retrospect, probably not.
Yeah, probably not. So that I don't think I extend him. Now maybe next year you could get him back on a somewhat affordable contract, but I'm not committing another year.
Funny story about Dex that I always remember. When we went for rookie minicamp, I remember we were in the field house, and always what the Giants do on the first day of rookie minicamp is they have the draft picks pose for a photo with the head coach and the GM. And this particular photo that they were posing for was actually Daniel and Dexter and DeAndre Baker, just the first round picks.
Yeah.
And Gettleman was getting ready to pose with them. And I remember him saying to Dexter, "Come here, baby, you stand next to me." And he put his arm around him. He was just smiling from ear to ear. He's like, "I got me my hog Molly."
that was such a Dave Gettleman pick.
Oh my God. I was laughing so hard because I'm sitting there, and Daniel and Baker are looking like, what's wrong with this? You know?
Dave was more excited to draft a nose tackle than
my goodness.
Franchise quarterback.
He loved his hog mollies. He
did.
He definitely did. So just a little behind the scenes memory that I have there. All right. Question from Ron Juan. What would you prefer, a great O-line or a top 5 defense? I want both, but gee, if I had to pick one or the other, wow.
All right, I'm gonna give my and again, like you said,
I gotta think this one over.
I want both.
I do too.
But if I had to pick one, I think I'd go with the top 5 O-line, and I'm gonna give my a couple reasons why. I think, one, we're going to have a young quarterback coming in. So you want to be able to situate him as best as possible. It's an offensive game. You want to be able to protect your quarterback, get the most out of your offense. The other thing is, look around the league. It is incredibly difficult in today's modern day NFL with the salary cap and so on and so forth to be able to maintain a top 5 defense for 5, 6, 7 straight years. A lot of that comes down to your defensive coordinator being able to get the most out of the talent that's provided to him. So I think it's more likely that a top 5 offensive line for a 6, 7, 8 year period would be more sustainable than a top 5 defense. You think back to the Chicago Bears in 2018, the year they won 11-5. They had a defense that you said to yourself, "Oh my God, this is gonna be a top 3, top 4 defense for the next 5, 6 years." They fell apart rather quickly. So I think I would lean towards the line for the reasons that I said.
And along those lines, what those of you who read me and who have heard me on the show before, what have I always said about Daniel Jones? I've said they brought this guy in and they did not prepare for him. They did not have good receivers. They had a decent running game with Saquon. They didn't have an offensive line. And I've always made the comparison to bringing home a newborn baby and not having the crib and the bassinet and the changing table and all the things you need to acclimate the newborn baby to the house. Same thing with a quarterback. You look at Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert. What did all those teams do? They basically put in place a solid support system, which the Giants really didn't do for Daniel Jones. I mean, you can make that argument. I think it's a fair argument. So to that point, I would say offensive line. I mean, and you're right.
Especially for the where our organization is right now, like that we need to be able to develop a young quarterback. But my answer is I want both. I
want both too.
You probably need both to be able to compete for a Super Bowl. Maybe not top 5, but you definitely need to be above average in both categories. So you need both. I don't want anybody to think I'm discounting the defense. I want a incredible defense. But if I had to pick one with the state of the franchise right now, I think I would lean more towards the line.
Yeah, for sure. No, I just saw a question. I didn't see who answered it, but here it is. JC Silva wanted to know, please tell me Danny Shelton is not coming back. No,
better not be.
I don't think he is. And that was the other thing, Chris, that kind of drove me crazy about last year in particular. A lot of, for those who don't know, the head coach and the GM do try to ideally work together. The head coach will go to the GM and say, I want this type of player, that type of player, that type of player. And when, then it's up to the GM to do the scouting and say, okay, Joe Blow, for example, matches what you want in a tight end, or Pete Smith matches what you want in an offensive tackle. When Joe Judge was here, I can't help but wonder if he was giving specific names to Gettleman, saying, I want Shelton, I want Keon Crossan, I want this guy, I want that guy. And, one of the things that kind of drove me crazy about the roster building process last year is that they took a lot of guys, not only that Judge had some familiarity with in terms of, New England or Alabama, but a lot of guys who were primarily special teams guys. And I was like, don't get me wrong, special teams is important, but I thought they overdid it if that's possible.
You think? They definitely overdid it. and the fact that, and I definitely think that was Joe Judge driven. Not trying to excuse Gettleman for some of the mistakes he's made during his tenure with the Giants. He made plenty of them, but I definitely think that was Joe Judge driven, the special teams element, and the amount of attention that they put towards the special teams for our special teams to be at best mediocre last year was beyond. Like when they trade a 6th-round pick for Keon Crossan, we carried 2 fullbacks. We drafted a running back in the 6th round with Brightwell that was specifically for special teams. When you put that, and what's his name? The guy, like you said, from New England, the safety that was a special team. Ebner. Yeah, we brought him back. For them to pay that much attention towards the special teams and for it not to be a top 5 unit in the league was not good. And I thought that they definitely put way too much attention on that unit specifically.
Yeah, and it left them, I think, bare at other spots. And I just,
carry 2 fullbacks. A lot of teams in the NFL.
I know, it's funny. I predicted that in my roster predictions on Giants Country, and I had somebody write to me say, "What are you crazy? 2 fullbacks?" I said, "Don't be shocked. I could see this happening for special teams value, And sure enough, when they kept it, I reached out to the person. I said, "Do you still think I'm crazy?" And they're like, "I don't think you're crazy. I think Joe Judge is crazy for keeping 2 fullbacks."
Yeah.
That was wild. That was definitely wild. So, all right, let me see. Let's see. We've got cross and guard. I think oh, here we go. Yeah, we didn't answer this one yet. Dwayne Lowry, your thoughts on Cross and at 5 and Gardner at 7? 5 is kind of high for me for Cross. I don't know. See, I gotta be honest with you. I'm gonna look at more tape on Cross.
Mhm.
But right now, I've gotta say I'm not in love with that prospect. Aquano, yes, Neal, yes. Cross, I see a lot of good that could sway me, but I gotta look at some more stuff on him. I don't to me, that's too high for him. I mean, is it
Yeah.
too high in your opinion?
Maybe slight, like I said, slightly, yes. But the Cross pick, I don't think is going to excite anybody. But it's a pick where if he turns out to be a good right tackle, you're okay with it. It's a long-term building block piece. He definitely doesn't possess the upside of some of the other guys that you could take there. I'm not going to be ecstatic if we take him, but I'm also not going to rag on the pick. It's going to be a pick where I'm like, okay, that's now we don't have to worry about the tackle for the next 10 years. We got a guy that fills a huge need for this team. It would be who I would probably take at 5, but I'd understand the pick.
Yeah, for sure. All right, now this one I like. Fred Nantara. My ideal picks would be Thibodeau, I think it's pronounced. I'm sorry, and Ikwanu. What do y'all think? I'd sign up for that.
Yeah. I'd rush to the podium for that. To me, that would be like a Giants fan's dream. You're getting arguably the most talented edge rusher in this year's draft class and arguably the most talented tackle. The bad news is there's a good chance neither one of them are going to be there. But if at 5, let alone 5 and 7, but if we could get both of those guys, yeah, you'll see parties in the streets in New York and New Jersey.
You'll hear me yell "Wahoo!" all the way from wherever I'm covering the draft.
Now, let me ask you about Thibodeau or Thibodeau, however it's pronounced. A lot of people have been buying into this narrative that maybe he doesn't love the sport as much as some, and the drive's not there. I'll take him. I'm not buying into that. The way I look at that is that's a narrative that's being drawn up to get clicks, and maybe that will be the case, but to me, he is way too talented. You're talking about a guy that was the consensus number 1 pick in this year's draft over the last 2 years. Obviously, that has since changed. Aiden Hutchinson had an incredible year. He's moved up draft charts. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying this narrative that Thibodeau is going to drop out of the top 6 or 7 picks. I think he's too talented. I think the upside is way too high with a player like that. His upside, in my opinion, is higher than Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah, I'm not buying it either. But I'm also thinking back to last year how Parsons was supposed to be a top 10 pick, and he kind of, I think, fell out of the top 10. That said, I don't know where this narrative comes from. I guess maybe because Thibodeau is so outgoing. He was wonderful at the combine. The guy was just
he ran a 1.59 10-yard split.
Well, I'm also talking his personality.
He
was very forthcoming. He answered all the questions. He was entertaining, very open and honest, I thought. And maybe, people are mistaking that as, he's more concerned about his brand or he's more concerned about this. Look, the guy was productive in college. So, you don't be that productive if you're not taking the game seriously. I don't understand where that narrative
the other thing is, I'll say this. This is a guy that knew going into the year, he's a top 5 pick. And if he had any kind of small injury that he was worried about, I can't really blame him. To be honest with you, if he was a little bit worried about, potentially hurting his future in the NFL, if maybe he did take a playoff here or there at the college level. I know a lot of people don't like to see that or hear that. That doesn't mean that that's going to happen at the NFL level. And again, I don't watch Oregon. I don't watch every Oregon game, but I know that's kind of in the book. Aiden Hutchinson was a guy that had to prove himself this year. He was not even viewed as like a top 100 prospect going into the year. I don't think that's going to deter me from taking Thibodeau if I like him.
Yeah, I would sign up for that pick. Definitely.
If you believe in your coaching staff, he's the guy with the most potential at that position.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, but I think he can be the Batman that this pass rush hasn't had since Jason Pierre-Paul.
Yeah, he's a beast.
He's a beast. Absolutely. Absolutely. I would take that. So, all right. Next question comes from Ron Juan. Okay. So, would you take then the '07 Patriots offense or the '85 Bears defense?
Ooh.
I'm taking the Bears defense because the Giants couldn't beat them. They beat the '07 no, that's not a
That's
good
a
reason to do
great
that.
question.
That's it's not my start of my answer. I was joking, folks. I mean, obviously different teams, but that is a great question. Hmm. Offense offense scores points, but defense wins championships. And that '85 Bears defense, man, they were that scheme.
I
Holy
mean, you got the
crap.
85, the best. I didn't.
That's
I was born in '85, so I didn't get to see it. But I know it's
I
regarded.
saw it.
I know it's regarded as like the all-time great defense.
Oh, it was awesome, but it was a different scheme. It was that 46 zone defense, I think it was called.
The best defense I've ever seen is the 2000 Ravens defense that really
Yes,
destroyed us in the
yes.
Super Bowl. Then you got the Bucks that were a great defense in like '02. The Seahawks, like I said earlier, that was a great defense. There's been a number, but the Ravens one really stands out to me. But I think in '85, I'm taking the Bears defense over the Patriots '07 offense.
I think so.
Today, I think I'm taking the Patriots offense over the '85 Bears defense. And
Ooh.
I think both are. You need a great defense. Don't get me wrong, but I think I could build an adequate defense to go along with an offense like the New England Patriots in today's league. I think you need to be able to put up points. So today, I think I'm going with the '07 Patriots offense.
Well, if you can have an offense that can eat up the clock and win the time of possession, you might be able to get
You
by
can win
with
with
a
both. Don't get me wrong.
yeah.
Yeah,
But I'm
like
just saying, if you have an offense that can chew up the clock, then that can mitigate, having a defense that maybe isn't a top 5 or top 10 unit. So I can make a case for the better offense. Definitely. That being said, I remember that 1985 Bears defense. Again, it was a different type of era, and but oh my God, that unit. Oof,
yeah.
that was something. That ranks right up
Don't
there.
sneeze at the '86 Giants defense either.
No, you can't snooze on them either. You're right. They
Yeah.
were more of but they were more like a traditional. Well, no, I don't even think you can say they were traditional because they Belichick was just a master. I mean, Belichick did stuff the opposite of what you would think he would have done. And I always think back to Super Bowl 25.
Well,
And
against the Bills, right?
yes, and
His
how
game plan, and again, I was too young to,
that
but
game plan was
obviously,
brilliant.
yeah,
It
I
was
went back and
brilliant.
watched it, but his game plan was much like the game plan in '07, where
Yes.
we ran the ball. The first drive, we took up 11 minutes against the Patriots. Nobody expected him to do that, but his game, it was masterful
Yeah.
in that game.
Yeah. I mean, Belichick, for those who weren't alive or don't remember, in that Super Bowl 25, they let Thurman Thomas run wild.
You went mute for me. I don't know if you mute for everybody else. You went mute for me. This happened pre-show too. Something came out of her microphone. Let me know in the chat if you guys can't hear Pat. Maybe it's me. What's up, Lou, man? Thanks for popping in. What's up, Lorenzo? I'm just waiting for them to. Lloyd says no, they can't hear you. Tyrone says they can't hear you. She's going to come back in, maybe. No, still nothing. I'm going to talk to the chat while you try to fix that. And I'll answer a couple of your guys' questions. I'm not going to be able to pull it up on the board. She's trying to fix it. No sound from her. I cannot hear Pat. You guys ask me questions. I'll try to answer your couple. We're going to be live for probably another 10, 12 minutes anyway. We said 2 hours, but I'll try to answer a couple of your guys' questions. Apologize for that. So she something probably popped out of the computer or something. What's up, Ed, man? By the way, thank you to everybody for being here. Always have a lot of fun. I'm going to start doing more lives on my channel as the draft gets closer. Kind of just waiting for stuff to talk about on a consistent basis. So really looking forward to that as well. Probably free agency. I'll go live a couple of days like I did last year, even though we're not going to be as active as we were last year. We don't have as much to spend, but there'll be some stuff to talk about. Hey, Chris, I'm so excited for the draft. Can't wait, Jonathan, man. New Yorker says everyone on Georgia was great in the underwear Olympics, but maybe you're good now. Nah, I still can't hear you. Carlos says things happen. Yeah, especially when you're live, stuff like this happens all the time. Chris, would you be okay with Kayvon and Sauce at picks 5? Of course, that's a slam dunk. What do you feel about the Giants do in free agency? All right.
Testing.
Now you're good now. You're good now. You're back.
Okay.
You're back.
Sorry about that. Nothing popped out. I don't know what the heck happened there. Nothing popped out. So I apologize, guys. Anyway, Chris, go ahead. Answer your question. I didn't mean
said Veek said, I think that's how you pronounce it. Says, Tina, what do you feel the Giants will do in free agency? I know it's boring. I know fans don't want to hear this. They want to hear Bobby Wagner. They want to hear sexy names. I don't want the Giants to do anything. I want 1 year cheap contracts and roster turnover. Get comp picks. I want to start building this thing. I know it's boring. I know fans don't want patience. We have to think about the future of this football team. We have to think about alleviating the cap problem and getting comp picks too. If you spend, it offsets the potential comp picks that you could get from some of these guys leaving the football team. So, fill a couple of holes, but on 1 year deals. Maybe get a guard and interior offensive lineman like we talked about earlier. Maybe some depth at areas on the defense. Maybe a rotational linebacker, but I don't want any big splashes in free agency. 1 year contracts.
Yeah, if I could just jump in. And can everybody hear me, by the way? Can you hear me, Chris?
You're good.
Okay, perfect, because I switched microphones here. Just on the idea with these contracts, I think what you're going to probably see, because remember, the Giants did a lot of 1 year contracts last year. And
2019 too, we did. That was all we did.
Yeah, and that's a sign of a team trying to stretch out salary cap money. What I think you might see is a lot of 2 year contracts where maybe they can front load them or something like that. I mean, it's at certain positions. I mean, you will see a few guys that get veteran minimum type deals, but I don't think they're going to go crazy the way they did last year. Last year was just crazy what they did. And I saw that what they were trying to do, they were trying to optimize the money that was available. But I also remember saying at the time, my God, they're setting themselves up for a major, major cap problems in the following year. So ideally, you don't want to kick the money down the can, kick the can down the road. But some of these guys, you got to try and restructure. And on Giants country, folks, for those who didn't see it, I did a comparison on how the Bills used to structure contracts or how they structure contracts versus how the Giants used to do it under Gettleman. And there are some very noticeable differences. If you guys want to check that article out, it's on giantscountry.com, the site that I write for.
Yeah, I that's one thing I definitely think we're going to bring. You look around the league, you look at the Cowboys with the way that we did it a little bit last year, but we weren't very creative with, like you said, with the way that we structured our contracts. The Cowboys have these voidable years with Dak Prescott, and they find a way to be able to maneuver the cap. I think hopefully we get more creative by bringing in some different minds. But I saw Sadiq says Laken Tomlinson or James Andrew. No, I don't think we're going to be able to get any. Maybe Tomlinson. I don't know what his market's going to be. The guy from the 49ers, the guard, but I would guess he's probably out of our price range. I don't think we're going to be able to get any big name offensive linemen.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, they got this kid Gano from who was with
the Falcons. Yeah, he was from the Falcons.
Yeah, and that deal's not done yet. They still got to clear money out for that. But it's going to be, I think, the mid range, the lower range guys. I hate to call them cheap because that's to me that's a derogatory term for a guy. But you're not going to spend big money. I just don't see it, to be honest with you. But anyway, let me see a few other questions here. I think we covered a lot, Chris. Did we cover every aspect of the roster? We talked running backs, tight ends, receivers. What did we talk about here?
Somebody asked about Jones. I think it was. Let me go take a quick look. Lloyd said, "Do you see Jones playing well enough this season to get another contract?"
Okay.
We could talk about that, I guess.
Yeah, let's get that.
I'm not a fortune teller, so I'm not going to say one way or the other. I don't know.
I put it on the screen, but anyway, I can't find the question. But do I see Jones playing well enough? Here's the thing with Jones right now. I need to know where he is with his neck. That's my number one concern. That neck injury, I've said this before. I was concerned with Jones taking off with the ball in his hands as a runner, lowering his head, lowering his shoulder. I was concerned that he was going to get injured and miss a lot of games. And of course, it happened. And I wish I had been wrong on that. That said, I don't believe Jones has been cleared for contact yet. And it's only March, so don't panic. We've got plenty of time yet. But I need to see where he is at. That's number one. Number two, I need to see once he is cleared for contact, has he learned how to slide feet first? Because if he's going to take off with the ball in his hands, he better slide feet first. I don't want to see him diving and playing the role of the tough guy. All right. Number three, I want to see what they put in front of him with an offensive line, because that's going to be important. I think the scheme that Dable and Mike Kafka are going to build will tailor to Jones's strength. They've sought input from this guy. What do you like to run, Daniel? What can we do? And that's a starting point. I don't think that past coaching staffs have necessarily done that as much as this coaching staff has done. That all being said, my other big concern with Daniel Jones is the mental processing aspect of it.
Yeah.
You go back and you look at Daniel Jones when his first read is taken away. It's suddenly, what do I do? What do I do?
He panics. Yeah.
He panics. Exactly. That's where the mistakes come in. So I need to see a significant jump in that aspect. At times last year, it looked like it was coming along, but not enough for my taste. So those are some of the aspects that I need to see before I can sit here and say, yes, Daniel Jones is going to play better in this offense. There's just a lot of variables that have to be taken into consideration. And, is he intelligent? Yes. But right now I haven't seen that intelligence necessarily transfer to the football field. We talked about Will Hernandez earlier in the show and how that was part mental. We talked about a little bit with Evan Ingram and how part of that was mental. A person could be book smart, life smart, but there's also football smart. And if you don't have that high football acumen, you're not going to go very far. And that's what I need to see from Daniel Jones. What happens if his first read is not there? Is he going to panic? Is he going to do something stupid? Or is he going to, eat the ball if need be? What's going to happen?
That is a fantastic answer. You hit on pretty much every one of my talking points outside of maybe improvement of the red zone, which he struggled with mightily the last 2 years. And some of that may have to do with the scheme and the line and everything else. But you hit on pretty much every talking point. That's a fantastic answer. To sum it all up, what I'll say about this is I don't think Jones, for me at least, and I want Jones to be the guy more than anybody. Trust me, I'm a Giants fan. I don't want to have to draft another quarterback. I think he's a great kid. I want him to be the greatest quarterback in franchise history. But realistically speaking, there outside of being having a Joe Burrow-like jump, which I think is asking a lot this year, I don't think I'd give him a long-term commitment. And there's a lot of factors. The injury is part of it. The potential upside for me is part of it. I don't see a Josh Allen-like upside. That's not a slight on Jones. That's a lot of quarterbacks. But with what quarterbacks make in today's NFL, I mean, look at what Rodgers just got paid. Look at what we have 4 quarterbacks right now making over $40 million a year. Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, now Aaron Rodgers, and Pat Mahomes. And if I don't feel he is that level of quarterback or that potential level of quarterback, it's very hard for me to justify giving him a long-term extension. Now, does that rule out the possibility if he improves of potentially franchise tagging him and giving him that's possible, but I don't think I'm going to be on board pretty much no matter what at the end of this year of giving him a 4-year deal for $40+ million a year, which is the market for quarterbacks in today's day and age in the NFL. So my answer is probably no. I don't think he's going to be worthy of a second contract extension, and I hope I'm wrong, but I got to give him my fair and unbiased opinion.
And here's the other thing you got to remember: quarterback growth is never linear. So it's not going to be like he's good, week 1 and then week 2 better, week 3 better. You're going to have peaks and valleys. You want to have more peaks though than valleys with him. And, I think Daniel Jones, in terms of scouting, there's a category known as can win with this guy. I think they can win with him.
Yeah, no, I agree. They can. I agree with for fans that think that, at least in my opinion, for fans that think that Daniel Jones can't win and he's absolute trash, I disagree with that. Do I think Daniel Jones, if he develops and is put in the right scheme, can have a Ryan Tannehill-like resurgence? Yeah, I do. I think Tannehill was put in an ideal spot and he can win games. I definitely think Daniel Jones can win games. I definitely think he's more talented than some people give him credit for, but I don't necessarily think that he's a second contract quarterback. at least right now.
Yeah, I mean, let's see what happens. I mean, maybe he steps in and this is the magic combination. But, I see some other comments here that it's going to depend on the line they put in front of him. Absolutely. These are all factors, but going to be interesting for sure. So anyway, folks, my voice, as you can tell, is starting to die on me. And it's a shame because I rested.
You pushed through. You were drinking water. You were following it over.
I apologize. I don't normally talk for 2 hours straight. I don't like to talk for 2 hours straight, but I was so excited to do this show. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I apologize for the technical difficulties and for my voice cutting out a little bit. Just how I'm built, unfortunately. Why you'll never hear me on the radio, but hope you enjoyed the show, everybody. Chris, this was a blast. We're gonna have to do this again as we get closer to the draft. And this time, what I'll do is I'll make sure that I really rest my voice so that I can power through. And but great questions, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Locked On Giants podcast. Make sure you tune in on Monday. My full interview with Adoree Jackson will air on Monday. Also coming up next week, I'm scheduled to speak with a Giants legend from Super Bowl 21. So that should be fun. And then, of course, free agency starts. So there will be plenty to talk about in the land of the Giants. And, of course, make sure you are checking out my man, Chris Guzzo's channel. I know I check it out. Love that. You know what it was?
What is going on? No, I appreciate I appreciate you having me on. Always love coming on, talking football with you. I'm definitely going to check out that Adoree Jackson interview because he came out with some telling quotes about how he's going to be pissed off if the New York Giants move on from James Bradberry. So
I asked him about that. Actually, for those who want a sneak peek, I have something on Giants Country. I have an article and part of the video if you want to check that out on Giants Country. But I've got the entire thing. Adoree was great. We talked about just about everything. His beginnings. His mother dealing with breast cancer, which was a big, played a big part on him. I flat out asked him. I said, "What went wrong in Tennessee?" So it was a very detailed and I thought good interview. And I hope, if you guys tune in that you will enjoy it. So that's coming your way Monday. So until then, everybody, have a fantastic weekend. Christopher, thank you as always. And listeners, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next week.